A home game tournament carries a special kind of charm. The field is small, the players familiar, and the structure often relaxed. But strategy still matters, and understanding how to adjust in a 16-player game can create a calm confidence as you play. In this story, we'll walk gently through every stage of a small field tournament, from the opening hands to the final showdown. Along the way, we'll highlight preparation, chip management, psychology, and the adjustments that matter most in this unique setting. Chapter 1. Welcome to the home game. Small field tournaments in home game settings offer a unique and intimate poker experience. With 16 players or fewer, the structure, pace, and atmosphere all differ from the sprawling casino events with hundreds of entries. In this guide, we will gently walk through the rhythm of these gatherings, showing how to balance patience with opportunism and how to adapt as the field narrows. Across the chapters ahead, we will cover every stage of play. We will begin with preparation, exploring the mindset needed to enjoy the friendly atmosphere while staying disciplined and steady. We will then look at the structure of typical home game tournaments, including common blind levels and starting stacks, so you know what to expect before the first hand is dealt. From there, we will explore the early stages, where survival and observation matter most, and the middle stages, where blinds rise and opportunities to apply pressure begin to appear. We will spend time on position and preflop decision-making, discussing which hands to play, which to fold, and how to handle speculative holdings. We will look at post-flop strategy in casual settings, including how to use continuation bets, when to value bet clearly, and how to approach bluffing sparingly in fields where opponents often call too wide. Later, we will walk through stack management, learning to adjust when you are deep, medium, or short stacked. We will cover how to transition into the final table, how to approach 3- and 4-handed play, and finally, how to navigate the unique demands of heads-up. Along the way, we will also pause to reflect on emotional control, reading opponents, and the quiet discipline required to stay calm when variance strikes. By the end of this journey, you will have a complete picture of how to play small field home game tournaments, from the first hand with a full table, to the last hand heads up, and every thoughtful decision in between. Chapter 2. Preparing your mindset. Every tournament begins with the mindset you bring to the table. In a home game with 16 or fewer players, this mindset often matters more than in larger fields. With fewer opportunities to recover from mistakes, and with every decision carrying greater weight, mental preparation is your anchor. It shapes how you respond to bad beats, how you interact with familiar opponents, and how you balance the fun of the night with the seriousness of competition. The first pillar of mindset is patience. Patience does not mean folding endlessly while waiting for pocket aces, but rather recognizing the value of restraint in the early levels. In a typical home game, starting stacks might range between 1,500 and 5,000 chips, with blinds beginning at 25/50ths or 50/100ths, and climbing every 15 to 20 minutes. This structure leaves little room for reckless speculation. Patience is understanding that you can fold for an orbit or two without falling behind, and that conserving chips early is often more valuable than chasing marginal spots. The second pillar is discipline. In friendly games, discipline is often the first thing to slip. Surrounded by friends or acquaintances, players loosen up, chasing weak draws or calling bets simply to stay involved in the action. Discipline is the quiet strength of folding hands that tempt you, resisting the urge to call out of boredom, and walking away from pots where the odds are not in your favor. A disciplined player in a small field is like a steady current, predictable in their calmness, and therefore difficult to exploit. Emotional steadiness forms the third pillar. Small tournaments magnify variance. A single unlucky river card can end your run, and with everyone watching at just 1 or 2 tables, it can feel personal. Emotional steadiness is the ability to accept variance as part of the game, to sigh and move forward instead of tilting into reckless play. Preparing yourself to handle bad beats calmly ensures that frustration does not dictate your decisions. The players who keep their composure when luck turns often find themselves still in the game when others have already self-destructed. Observation is another part of mindset that many players overlook. The early levels, where you fold often, are an opportunity to learn. Who limps into every pot? Who makes oversized bets with strong hands, and who bluffs too often? By watching quietly, you collect a mental map of the table that becomes invaluable when blinds rise and pots grow. Observation requires attentiveness, and attentiveness is easier when your mindset is calm and steady. Finally, a balanced mindset means appreciating the dual nature of home games. These tournaments are both social and competitive. You want to enjoy the conversation and camaraderie, while also maintaining your edge. A balanced approach allows you to laugh, engage, and be part of the group without letting the relaxed atmosphere erode your standards. When you strike this balance, you are both approachable and dangerous, able to play seriously without spoiling the fun. Together, these elements form the foundation for every decision you will make. By preparing your mind to be patient, disciplined, steady, observant, and balanced, you enter the tournament with quiet strength. In a small field where variance swings quickly and mistakes are costly, that foundation is what will carry you through. Chapter 3: Understanding the Structure. Every tournament has a skeleton, the structure that shapes its pace, its pressure, and the decisions players must make. In small field home games, the structure is often looser and faster than in professional settings, and understanding it before you play is essential. Knowing what to expect allows you to plan ahead, conserve chips when needed, and take advantage of moments others overlook. A common home game structure begins with blinds at 25/50ths or 51/100ths, with each level lasting 15 to 20 minutes. Starting stacks are usually shallow compared to casino tournaments, often between 1,500 and 5,000 chips. That means players begin with just 20 to 50 big blinds. With blinds increasing quickly, stacks shrink relative to the blinds, and effective stack depth shortens. What feels deep in the first level can quickly become short-stacked play within an hour. Unlike long casino events, where you can wait for hours before blinds climb, home games force action sooner. Understanding structure also means recognizing payout style. In many home tournaments, the top 3 spots are paid, with perhaps half the buy-in returned to third place, a larger portion to second, and the biggest share to the winner. Winner-take-all formats are also common. Each structure creates different pressures. In winner-take-all games, survival alone is not enough. You must accumulate chips to win outright. In top-heavy payout structures, patience to reach the final table must eventually give way to well-timed aggression. Level length also matters. A 20-minute blind level gives you more time to wait for spots than a 10-minute level, where blinds climb almost every orbit. When levels are fast, playing passively can leave you with no room to maneuver later. By contrast, slower levels reward extra patience and allow speculative hands to be played more often in position. Antes, if included, change the dynamic further. Even small antes, like 25 chips once blinds reach 200/400ths, add dead money to the pot, making blind stealing more valuable. Many home games skip antes, but when they are present, aggression becomes more profitable. Finally, structure includes rebuys and add-ons. Some home games allow players to rebuy chips if they bust early, often until a set level. Others include an add-on at the first break, where players can purchase additional chips regardless of their stack. Rebuys create looser early play, as players know they can buy back in, while add-ons encourage survival until the break. Adjusting to these structures, tight early in rebuy formats, aggressive near add-on periods, is part of mastering the flow. By studying and understanding the structure of your home tournament, you eliminate surprises. You know whether you will have time to wait, when blinds will pressure your stack, and how payouts will shape final table dynamics. The players who ignore structure often find themselves reacting under pressure. The players who prepare can plan calmly, adapting smoothly as the game evolves. Chapter 4: Observing opponents early. In the early levels of a small field home tournament, observation is your greatest weapon. With blinds low relative to stacks, there is little need to rush. Instead, these opening levels provide a rare opportunity to gather information, to map the tendencies of your opponents, and to quietly build the insights that will guide your decisions later. Observation begins before the first hand is dealt. Watch how players stack their chips. Some arrange them neatly, with every stack precise, suggesting a disciplined mindset. Others scatter chips loosely, a hint that they may be casual and unpredictable. Listen to table talk. Players who boast about wild plays or bad beats are often looser in style, while quiet players may lean conservative. These impressions, while not always accurate, help you build initial profiles. As the hands begin, focus on pre-flop tendencies. Who enters every pot with a limp? These players are often passive, preferring to see flops without committing heavily. Who raises frequently, regardless of position? These players lean aggressive and will often continuation bet, creating opportunities to trap later. Notice bet sizing as well. Casual players often bet in round numbers, 100, 200, 500, without regard for pot size. More experienced players size closer to half or 3/4 of the pot. On the flop, watch for continuation betting habits. Many home players bet automatically when they are the pre-flop raiser, regardless of board texture. This makes them vulnerable when the board strongly favors your range. Others check too often, revealing weakness when they miss. These patterns are rarely hidden for long. Pay attention also to showdowns. When hands are revealed, connect the action to the holdings. Did a player limp pre-flop with weak-suited connectors? Did another call 3 streets with only top pair? These observations give you concrete evidence of how they value hands, and that knowledge becomes gold as blinds rise. Observation also extends to emotional cues. Does a player fidget after betting? Do they sigh before folding? In home games, tells are often more visible than in casinos, because players are relaxed and less guarded. While not always reliable, these cues can reinforce what you already know from betting patterns. The goal of early observation is not to accumulate chips, but to build a mental playbook. When the field shrinks and blinds grow, you will already know who folds too much to raises, who never folds to river bets, and who bluffs recklessly. Armed with this knowledge, you can act decisively later, while opponents are still guessing. In small fields, where every edge matters, observation in the early levels may be your greatest advantage. Chapter 5: Playing tight in the opening levels. The early levels of a home tournament are where many players seal their fate. Excitement and curiosity push them into too many pots, bleeding chips before the real contest begins. In small fields, where every stack matters and blinds rise quickly, the players who play tightly in the opening stages often find themselves better positioned when the field begins to shrink. Playing tight means selecting hands carefully. In the first two blind levels, focus on premium pairs, through tens, strong Broadway hands like Ace-King, Ace-Queen and King-Queen suited, and suited connectors with strong connectivity, such as Jack-10 suited. These hands retain value even as stacks shorten. By contrast, hands like offsuit Ace-Rag or weak-suited kings often create more trouble than profit. In a 16-player field, dominated pots are common, and calling with weak aces frequently leads to costly situations. The key to tight early play is understanding effective stack depth. With starting stacks often 30 to 40 big blinds, post-flop maneuvering room is limited. Speculative hands like small pairs or low-suited connectors rely on implied odds, the chance of winning a large pot when you hit. But with shallow stacks, these implied odds shrink. Chasing a set with pocket threes is less profitable when stacks are only 20 or 30 big blinds deep, because you cannot win enough when you hit to cover the cost of all the misses. Tight play also means resisting the urge to defend blinds loosely. In larger tournaments with deep stacks, defending with marginal suited holdings is common. In home games with fast structures, defending too wide often leads to post-flop trouble, with little room to recover. Folding more in the early levels is not weakness, it is preservation. Patience also extends to avoiding unnecessary confrontations. In the early stages, you gain little from battling an aggressive opponent without strong holdings. Let them win small pots, while you conserve chips for spots where you hold clear advantages. Small fields resolve quickly, and the chips you save early may become the fuel for a decisive push later. Playing tight does not mean playing timidly. When you do enter a pot, raise with conviction. Limping weakens your image and invites multi-way pots, which are dangerous in shallow structures. By raising, you define the hand, narrow the field, and increase the chance of winning uncontested pots. Over time, this creates an image of strength, which will serve you well when you expand your range in later levels. By committing to tight play in the opening levels, you set yourself apart from opponents who treat every hand as an opportunity. While they dwindle their stacks chasing small edges, you preserve yours, waiting calmly for moments that matter. When the blinds rise and the field shrinks, you will be ready to apply pressure from a position of strength. Chapter 6. The Power of Position. In poker, position is often called the ultimate advantage. Nowhere is this more true than in small field home tournaments. With starting stacks relatively shallow and blinds rising quickly, the ability to act after your opponents often matters more than the specific cards you hold. Position is the lens through which you should view nearly every decision. At its core, position refers to where you sit relative to the dealer button. The closer you are to acting last, the more information you gain before committing chips. In the early levels, this advantage allows you to see which players enter the pot passively, who raises aggressively, and who hesitates before folding. Later, when pots grow larger and decisions carry more weight, position allows you to control the size of the pot, apply pressure at the right times, and escape marginal spots with fewer losses. Consider two examples. Holding Ace-Queen offsuit under the gun in a home game with blinds at 25/50ths, raising may invite 3 or 4 callers behind you, creating a multi-way pot where your hand must navigate complex post-flop situations. With the same hand on the button, however, you can raise and often play heads-up against the blinds, maximizing the strength of your holding. The hand itself has not changed, but its value increases dramatically because of position. Position also determines which speculative hands are worth playing. Low-suited connectors like 6-7 suited are often unplayable from early position, where raises behind you are likely, and your ability to see the flop cheaply is reduced. The same hand on the button, however, becomes playable, especially if several players have limped. You gain the chance to see the flop with favorable odds, and, if everyone checks, the opportunity to steal the pot with a well-timed bet. In small fields, players often underestimate how much position shapes their outcomes. Casual opponents limp frequently from early position, creating bloated multi-way pots where skill is diminished. By avoiding early position traps and focusing on playing more hands in late position, you create a quiet but powerful edge. Over time, this edge compounds as you win more uncontested pots and avoid difficult post-flop situations. Position is not only about which hands to play, but also about how to bet. On the button, continuation betting becomes more effective because you act last, forcing your opponent to decide without knowing your next move. Out of position, continuation bets are often met with resistance, as opponents can float with marginal holdings and put you to tough decisions later. Understanding when your position enhances your story and when it weakens it is critical. Even defending blinds must be approached with position in mind. Many players feel compelled to call raises from the small or big blind to protect their chips, but doing so out of position often leads to losses. Defending wide ranges without initiative creates difficult post-flop spots, especially in shallow structures where stack-to-pot ratios are low. Folding more often from the blinds, unless holding premium or connected hands, conserves chips that will be more valuable when you hold position later. Ultimately, position is about control. It gives you the freedom to dictate the pace of a hand, to extract value when strong, and to retreat with minimal loss when weak. In small field tournaments, where every chip is magnified, this control is priceless. By respecting position, tightening in early seats and widening in late ones, you transform your range and your results. Over a night of play, position becomes less about where you sit and more about how steadily you build your edge. Chapter 7. Preflop Guidelines, Simplified. Preflop play sets the stage for everything that follows. In home tournaments with 16 players or fewer, where stacks are shallow and blinds rise quickly, making clear and consistent preflop decisions prevents you from falling into traps that drain chips unnecessarily. Simplifying your approach ensures that you enter pots with purpose and fold when the situation offers little potential. The first guideline is to raise, not limp. Limping is common in home games, as players want to see flops cheaply, but it rarely creates long-term profit. By limping, you invite multi-way pots where strong hands lose value, and you miss the chance to win uncontested. Raising, on the other hand, defines your hand, narrows the field, and builds a pot you can control. When you play, play assertively. Premium hands should always be raised. Pairs like aces through tens, and strong Broadway holdings such as ace-king, ace-queen, and king-queen suited, play well in shallow structures because they dominate the ranges of opponents who call too loosely. By raising these hands, you maximize value and prevent weaker holdings from seeing cheap flops. Speculative hands require more care. Low-suited connectors and small pairs rely on implied odds, the chance of winning big pots when you connect. But in home tournaments, starting stacks are often only 20 to 40 big blinds, limiting those implied odds. These hands are better played in late position, where you can see how many players enter the pot and decide whether the price is right. Out of position, they should usually be folded. Weak aces are another common trap. Hands like ace-7 offsuit look appealing, but in small fields, they are frequently dominated by stronger aces. Calling raises with these holdings often leads to costly second-best situations. Unless suited or accompanied by strong connectivity, weak aces are better folded early. 3-betting preflop is a weapon worth using selectively. Against aggressive players who raise frequently, re-raising with premium hands extracts value and discourages them from bullying the table. Occasionally, you can widen your 3-bet range with suited broadways or medium pairs, especially when in position to balance your image. However, avoid overusing this tool. Most home game opponents call too often for light 3-bets to be profitable. Stack size awareness must guide preflop decisions. With 25 or more big blinds, you have room for raises and post-flop play. With 10 to 25 big blinds, consider more straightforward shove or fold decisions, especially against short-handed tables. With fewer than 10 big blinds, limping or calling is rarely correct. Shoving all in becomes the clearest path. Finally, tailor your preflop play to the tendencies of the table. Against loose opponents who call too wide, tighten your range and extract value when strong. Against passive tables where limps abound, raise more often to isolate. Simplified guidelines become powerful when adjusted slightly for context. By clarifying your preflop approach, raise when playing, avoid traps, respect stack sizes, you reduce the noise of decision-making. Instead of being lured into marginal spots, you preserve chips for moments where the odds favor you. In small fields, where every pot matters, this clarity can be the difference between an early exit and a late finish. Chapter 8: Managing Speculative Hands. Speculative hands, suited connectors, small pairs, and one-gap combinations add variety to your range, but require careful handling. In deep-stacked cash games, these hands thrive because they can win large pots when they connect. In small-field home tournaments, however, starting stacks are shallow, and blinds rise quickly. This reduces the value of speculative holdings and magnifies the risks of misplaying them. Understanding implied odds is central. A hand like 5-6 suited relies on making straights or flushes to generate profit. In a tournament with only 20 to 30 big blinds effective, however, the pot is rarely large enough to justify repeated calls hoping for a perfect board. When stacks are short, the chips you lose chasing outweigh the chips you gain when you hit. This does not mean speculative hands should never be played. It means they should be chosen carefully, in position, and with clear goals. Position transforms these holdings. Suited connectors from early position often become liabilities, as raises behind you force difficult folds. The same cards on the button, facing several limpers, gain value. You can see the flop cheaply, act last on every street, and apply pressure when opponents check. Position gives speculative hands the breathing room they need. Small pairs, such as pocket 3s or 4s, are another example. Their value comes from hitting a set, but with shallow stacks, you may not win enough when you do. Calling raises with these pairs is often a losing proposition unless stacks are deep enough or the price is favorable in multi-way pots. Instead, look for opportunities to open raise small pairs aggressively from late position, stealing blinds or isolating weaker players. When you do hit a set, you are disguised and can extract maximum value. Suited one-gappers, like 9-7 suited, fall between pure connectors and speculative traps. They can create disguised straights or flushes, but they also miss often. These are best used selectively against passive tables, where limpers allow cheap flops. Against aggressive opponents, folding is safer. A useful guideline is this: speculative hands gain value when 2 or more conditions align, when you are in position when the pot is multi-way, and when effective stacks are at least 30 big blinds. If one or more of these is missing, folding is often best. By applying this lens, you avoid leaking chips into pots that rarely pay off. Finally, resist the temptation to overplay draws. Even strong draws like a flush draw plus straight draw should be balanced against stack size. In shallow tournaments, semi-bluffing all-in with these holdings can be correct, but chasing with passive calls often drains chips. Commit decisively when odds favor you, fold when they do not. Managing speculative hands is about discipline and awareness. By playing them selectively, in the right conditions, you preserve your stack for the hands that matter most. In small field tournaments, this discipline is often what separates those who dwindle early from those who build toward the final table. Chapter 9. Post-flop Basics for Casual Games. The post-flop stage is where poker becomes most alive. Pre-flop play is about hand selection, stack sizes, and deciding whether to enter the pot. Once the flop is revealed, the real puzzle begins. The community cards create a canvas of possibilities, and your job is to decide how your story continues. In small field home tournaments with casual players, post-flop play often decides who advances and who busts early. By grounding yourself in a few simple principles, you can navigate these moments with clarity and confidence. The first principle is understanding board texture. Not all flops are created equal. A flop like King 7-2 Rainbow is considered dry. It offers few draws and is unlikely to connect strongly with your opponents. On such boards, a continuation bet, the common post-flop bet made by the pre-flop raiser, often wins the pot immediately. Compare this to a flop like 10-9-8 with 2 hearts. This is a wet board filled with straight and flush draws where multiple opponents may have connected in some way. Betting here is more dangerous, as you are more likely to be called or raised. Recognizing whether a board is dry or wet, paired or unpaired, coordinated or disconnected, is your first step to making better post-flop decisions. Continuation betting, or C-betting, is a tool you should use carefully. In casual games, many players continuation bet every time they raised pre-flop, regardless of board texture. This habit makes them predictable and exploitable. You can separate yourself from this pattern by choosing spots wisely. On dry flops where opponents are unlikely to have hit, a small bet, perhaps half the pot, will often take it down. On wet flops, checking may be wiser, keeping the pot smaller until you have more information. This selectivity prevents you from building pots where your equity is unclear. Let us consider an example. Imagine you raise pre-flop with ace-king suited, and the flop comes queen 6-2 rainbow. This board favors you as the pre-flop raiser, and your ace-king has 2 overcards with backdoor flush potential. A continuation bet here pressures your opponent to fold many holdings, such as small pairs or missed broadways. Now imagine instead that the flop comes 9-8-7 with 2 clubs. Your ace-king looks far weaker. A continuation bet on this board risks running into straights, 2 pairs or strong draws. Checking back controls the pot and allows you to re-evaluate on the turn. By tailoring your approach to board texture, you avoid falling into the trap of automatic betting. Pot control is another cornerstone of post-flop play in shallow stack tournaments. With starting stacks of 20 to 40 big blinds, pots grow quickly. A single raise and call pre-flop can create a pot worth a third of your stack. In this environment, overcommitting with one pair can be disastrous. Pot control means keeping the pot small when your hand is medium strength, such as top pair with a weak kicker or second pair. By checking behind on the turn instead of firing again, You avoid facing large bets on the river that put your tournament life at risk. Pot control buys you flexibility, allowing you to survive and choose better spots. Value betting, by contrast, should be decisive. Casual opponents often call with hands far weaker than yours, curious to see another card. When you hold a strong hand, such as top pair with a strong kicker or an overpair, betting for value steadily extracts chips. On the flop, a bet of half the pot is often enough to build. On the turn, sizing up to 2/3 pot pressures, weaker hands while still earning calls. On the river, 3/4 pot bets can maximize profit when opponents are committed. In home games, straightforward value betting is often more effective than clever traps. Players call because they want to see cards, and you should let them pay you for the privilege. Bluffing has its place, but it must be used sparingly in small fields. Many casual players are not inclined to fold, even with weak holdings. Bluffing them repeatedly is like pushing against a locked door. Instead, choose your bluff spots with care. Bluffing works best against opponents who can fold, particularly tighter players who dislike risking chips without strong hands. Bluffing also works on boards that tell a convincing story, such as when a flush card arrives on the turn, and you represent it with a strong bet. Avoid bluffing into multiple opponents, or on boards that connect heavily with common calling ranges. Remember that in home games, most profit comes from value, not deception. Reading opponents is especially valuable in casual fields. Some players give off physical cues when they miss. A quick check may reveal disinterest, while a confident chip placement may indicate strength. Others betray their hand strength through timing. Instant bets are often continuation bets made without thought, while long pauses followed by large bets may indicate real strength. These cues are not foolproof, but combined with betting patterns, they provide extra insight. In a relaxed home environment, where players are less guarded, such tells can be especially revealing. Stack-to-pot ratio, often abbreviated as SPR, is a technical concept that has practical use in home tournaments. It refers to the ratio of the effective stack to the size of the pot. For example, if the pot is 600 chips, and you and your opponent both have 3,000 chips behind, the SPR is 5. In general, lower SPRs favor big made hands like overpairs and top pair top kicker, while higher SPRs favor speculative draws and hands that can improve. In shallow tournaments, SPRs are often low, meaning strong top pairs are more valuable than in deep cash games. Understanding this dynamic helps you decide when to commit and when to slow down. Common mistakes by casual opponents can be anticipated and exploited. Many players overvalue top pair, committing stacks with weak kickers. Others chase draws without proper odds, calling bets they cannot afford. Some bluff too often, misunderstanding how rarely opponents fold in home games. By recognizing these patterns, you can adjust accordingly. Against players who overvalue top pair, tighten your calling range and let them overcommit. Against habitual chasers, size your bets to make their calls incorrect. Against frequent bluffers, call lighter with medium-strength hands. Each adjustment transforms their mistakes into your steady gains. Another dimension of post-flop play is planning ahead. Too many players think only about the street they are on. A better approach is to map the hand from flop to river. If you bet the flop, what turns improve you, and what turns hurt you? If you check the turn, what rivers give you a chance to bluff? By thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead, you avoid being caught off guard by board developments. Planning also prevents you from committing chips in spots where future cards are likely to undermine your holding. Multi-way pots are more common in home games, as casual players limp often and call raises loosely. Postflop. These pots require extra caution. When 2 or 3 opponents see the flop, the likelihood that someone has connected increases. Bluffing into multiple players rarely succeeds. Value betting remains strong, but you must be aware that resistance from multiple opponents often means you are behind. Pot control is especially valuable here. Rather than trying to push opponents out, let the cards and their mistakes dictate the flow. Finally, emotional steadiness plays a role in post-flop decisions. Facing aggression on the turn or river can feel intimidating, especially with marginal holdings. Preparing yourself to fold when beaten is as important as betting when strong. In casual games, folding does not signal weakness. It signals discipline. Each chip you save is another step toward deeper play. By keeping your emotions in check, you avoid the trap of curiosity calls that bleed stacks away. Post-flop play in small field home tournaments is about clarity, not complexity. Understand board textures, use continuation bets selectively, control pot sizes with medium hands, and bet strongly for value when ahead. Bluff sparingly, and only in convincing spots. Read opponents' patterns and cues, and adjust calmly to their tendencies. Plan your hands across streets, and respect the dynamics of multi-way pots. Above all, remain steady. In a game where casual opponents give away information and chips freely, your calm, thoughtful post-flop play will be the anchor that carries you to the later stages of the tournament. Chapter 10. Value Betting. Clearly, if there is one principle that quietly defines success in small field home tournaments, it is value betting. In these games, most opponents call far more often than they fold. They call out of curiosity, they call with weak pairs, and they call simply because they want to see what comes next. This calling tendency turns straightforward value betting into your most reliable weapon. While bluffs may fail against players who dislike folding, value bets consistently pay, building your stack one careful pot at a time. Value betting means betting when you expect weaker hands to call. The essence of this strategy is not deception, but clarity. You are not trying to scare opponents out of the pot. You are inviting them to stay in with worse holdings. In home games with 16 players or fewer, this approach takes advantage of a predictable dynamic. Casual players want to see showdowns. They will pay you to satisfy their curiosity, and your job is to make sure those payments are steady and consistent. To value bet effectively, you must first identify which hands are strong enough. In shallow stacked structures, where most players begin with 20 to 40 big blinds, the definition of strength changes. Top pair with a strong kicker, such as ace-queen on a queen-high board, is often enough to value bet across multiple streets. Overpairs like pocket kings or aces remain premium holdings, but even medium-strength hands can be candidates for value when opponents are prone to calling with worse. The key is to bet when you reasonably expect to be ahead, and when worse hands exist in your opponent's range that will call. Let us consider a simple example. You hold ace-queen offsuit, and the flop comes queen-8-3 rainbow. You have top pair, top kicker, a strong hand in this context. Against casual opponents, weaker queens like queen-jack, queen-10, or even queen-9 will call. Middle pairs like 8s or 3s may also call, as well as random holdings that contain an 8 or backdoor draws. By betting half the pot, you invite these weaker hands to continue. If you check, hoping to trap, many opponents will simply check back, denying you the value their curiosity would have delivered. In small fields, checking strong hands often means missing the best chance to grow your stack. Sizing is central to value betting. Bet too small, and you miss potential profit. Bet too large and you risk pushing weaker hands away. The sweet spot in most home tournaments is between half and 3/4 of the pot. This size is large enough to build the pot meaningfully, but not so intimidating that casual players fold their second-best holdings. On the flop, smaller bets often achieve the goal, especially when boards are dry. As the hand progresses, increasing your sizing across streets pressures weaker hands into committing, while also extracting maximum value when they stubbornly hold on. Let us look at a turn example. Suppose you bet the flop with ace-queen on queen 8-3, and your opponent calls. The turn is a 5, a safe card. Now you size up to 2/3 pot. Weaker queens, 80s, and pocket pairs are still likely to call, and you build a pot that sets up for a strong river bet. By gradually increasing your sizing across streets, you extract chips consistently, while keeping your opponent engaged. On the river, a 3/4 pot bet can often earn the maximum, especially if the board has not created obvious threats. This disciplined approach, small on the flop, larger on the turn, and strongest on the river, turns one strong hand into a well of value. One mistake players make in casual games is slow playing too often. They check strong holdings, hoping to trap opponents into betting. While this may work occasionally, it is less effective against players who are naturally passive. Many casual opponents prefer checking back unless they hold something strong themselves. By slow playing, you risk missing an entire street of value. In home tournaments, it is usually better to bet your strong hands clearly, trusting that opponents will call rather than bluff. Direct value is more reliable than elaborate traps. Another mistake is betting too large. Imagine holding pocket aces on a king-high board. You want weaker kings and smaller pairs to call. If you bet the size of the pot, many of those hands will fold, fearing they are outmatched. By betting 2/3 pot, you give them a reason to stay. The goal is not to scare away every weaker hand, but to welcome them into the pot. Value betting requires sizing that maximizes calls, not folds. Occasionally, you may face opponents who call with almost anything. Against these players, value betting becomes even more profitable. In such cases, you can widen your value range, betting with hands you might otherwise check. Second pair top kicker becomes a value bet when you know your opponent will call with even weaker pairs. A pair of 10s on a 9-high board may be worth betting if your opponent refuses to fold ace-high or smaller pairs. Adjusting your range to match your opponent's calling habits ensures you capture every bit of loose value they offer. Balancing value and bluffs is another layer of the story. While value betting should dominate in casual fields, occasional bluffs help protect your image. If you only ever bet strong hands, observant opponents may learn to fold whenever you bet. To prevent this, mix in bluffs sparingly, on scare cards, or with hands that block your opponent's strongest holdings. For example, holding the ace of spades when a third spade arrives on the board allows you to represent the flush. By bluffing occasionally, you make your value bets more believable, ensuring opponents continue to pay you off. Multi-way pots add complexity to value betting. In home games, limp-heavy play often creates flops with 3 or more players. In these spots, betting strong hands becomes even more important, as you want to charge multiple opponents for chasing. Suppose you flop a straight with 9-10 on a board of 8-7, jack. Betting strongly forces drawing hands, such as flush draws or top pairs, to pay dearly for the chance to improve. In multi-way pots, err on the side of larger sizing. The more players in the hand, the more value you can extract. Value betting also changes with stack sizes. When effective stacks are deep, 30 to 40 big blinds, betting across 3 streets builds meaningful pots without committing everything. When stacks are shorter, 10 to 20 big blinds, you may need to move all in by the turn or river to protect your value. In these situations, think ahead. If you plan to be all in by the river, size your bets accordingly, so the progression feels natural. This way you do not surprise your opponent with an oversized shove that scares them away. Consider another example with stack sizes in mind. You hold pocket jacks with 20 big blinds, and the flop comes 10-7-3 rainbow. Betting half the pot leaves you with a pot-sized bet behind. By betting again on the turn, you set up a river shove that feels natural. If instead you check the flop, the pot remains small, and your eventual shove may look suspicious, discouraging calls. Value betting across streets ensures smoother stack commitment, maximizing the chance of being paid. Emotional control plays a role in value betting too. Sometimes, fear of losing a big hand causes players to check when they should bet. They imagine the worst-case scenario, being outdrawn, being raised, being embarrassed at showdown. This fear often costs more chips than it saves. By betting confidently with strong hands, you accept that variance may intervene, but trust that the long-term profit will be yours. Each missed value bet is a chip you leave on the table, and in shallow tournaments, those chips are precious. Finally, remember that value betting is not about brilliance or complexity. It is about discipline and clarity. You are telling a simple story. I have a strong hand, and I expect worse hands to call. By keeping your approach straightforward, you avoid confusing yourself or your opponents. In home games, where casual players often call with curiosity, clarity is your greatest ally. Each value bet builds steadily, and over the course of a tournament, these steady gains accumulate into a deep run. Value betting clearly is the cornerstone of success in small-field home tournaments. Bet when you are ahead and expect calls from worse. Size your bets to invite those calls. Avoid slow plays that miss value, and resist oversized bets that drive opponents away. Adjust your range to match calling tendencies, and mix in bluffs sparingly to protect your image. Plan your value across streets, adapting to stack sizes and multi-way dynamics. Stay emotionally steady, trusting that steady value wins over time. In a field where curiosity keeps opponents calling, your clear, disciplined value betting will quietly build the path to victory. Chapter 11. Bluffing in a small field. Bluffing is one of the most misunderstood parts of poker, and in small field home tournaments, it often becomes even more misunderstood. Movies and television have taught players to see bluffing as the heart of poker, the daring move that wins pots with nothing but courage. In reality, bluffing is just one part of a larger strategy, and in a field of 16 players or fewer, it must be used carefully. Casual opponents call more often than they should. Stacks are shallow, and opportunities to bluff successfully are fewer than in deep-stacked professional games. Bluffing still has its place, but it is more about choosing the right spots than about constant aggression. The first truth to accept is that bluffing works less often in casual home games. Many opponents are curious and want to see your cards. They call with weak pairs, with ace-high, or even with hands that have no real showdown value. Against these players, bluffing repeatedly is a losing battle. Your chips vanish into calls you hoped would never come. Instead of forcing bluffs into opponents who cannot fold, you must recognize who is capable of laying down a hand. This begins with observation. If a player has called 3 streets with only second pair in earlier hands, you know they are unlikely to fold in future spots. By contrast, if another opponent has shown discipline and released top pair when the board grew dangerous, they become a better target for bluffs. Understanding board texture is central to effective bluffing. Just as with value betting, not all boards are equal. Bluffing on a dry board like King 7-2. Rainbow tells a convincing story when you are the pre-flop raiser, because your range naturally includes strong kings and high cards. A bet here can pressure weaker holdings into folding. On a board like 9-8-7 with 2 suits, however, bluffing becomes dangerous. Too many combinations connect with this texture. Opponents holding straight draws, flush draws, or even weak top pairs will call, leaving your bluff exposed. Choosing dry boards with few draws increases the chance that your story will be believed. Bluffing also works best when you hold blockers, which are cards that reduce the likelihood your opponent has a strong hand. For example, if the board shows 3 spades, and you hold the ace of spades, you block many of the nut flush combinations. Betting strongly in this spot tells a story that is both plausible and supported by your holding. Even if you do not have a flush, the presence of the ace of spades in your hand makes it less likely your opponent can call with one. Blockers give your bluffs added credibility. Timing matters as well. Bluffing works best when you have shown strength earlier in the hand. If you raised pre-flop, bet the flop, and then continue on the turn, your story flows naturally. Opponents are more likely to fold if the sequence of actions makes sense. Random bluffs that come out of nowhere are less believable and more likely to be called. Plan your bluffs the same way you plan your value bets, with consistency across streets. Stack sizes must also guide your bluffing decisions. With deep stacks, bluffs can be layered across multiple streets, building a story that pressures opponents to fold. In shallow home tournaments, stacks are often only 20 to 30 big blinds. This limits the number of streets available for bluffing. In these cases, semi-bluffs become more effective. A semi-bluff is when you bet with a drawing hand that has equity if called. For example, betting with a flush draw and 2 overcards gives you ways to win even if your opponent does not fold immediately. Pure bluffs, where you have no chance to improve, are riskier in shallow structures and should be used sparingly. Multi-way pots are especially poor environments for bluffing. In home games, where limping is common, many hands go to the flop with 3 or more players. Bluffing into several opponents at once rarely succeeds, as the chance that at least one connected with the board is high. Save your bluffs for heads-up pots, where the story is simpler and the likelihood of forcing folds is greater. Against multiple opponents, focus on value betting instead. Consider an example. You raise pre-flop with Jack-10 suited, and only the big blind calls. The flop comes Queen 9-4 rainbow. You have an open-ended straight draw and no pair. Betting here serves as a semi-bluff. If your opponent folds, you win the pot outright. If they call, you still have 8 outs to a straight, plus overcard potential. This type of bluff combines fold equity with drawing equity, making it far more profitable than pure bluffs. By contrast, imagine bluffing the same flop with 7-2 offsuit. You have no outs, and if called, you are almost certainly beaten. This is the difference between bluffs that make sense and bluffs that are simply hopeful wagers. Another key is to avoid bluffing the wrong players. In home tournaments, you will often find at least one opponent who calls nearly every bet. Bluffing this player is futile. Against them, the better strategy is to tighten your range and bet for value when strong. Conversely, some players fold too often, especially on later streets when the pot has grown. These players are ideal bluffing targets. The art lies in identifying which players fall into which category, and then adjusting your approach accordingly. Bluffing frequency should also be lower in small fields. Professional players in deep stacked tournaments balance their ranges with bluffs to remain unpredictable. In home games, predictability is less of a concern because opponents are rarely tracking your frequencies. They are more focused on their own hands than on constructing ranges for you. This means you can lean more heavily toward value betting while bluffing less, without being punished. A few well-chosen bluffs in key spots will be enough to maintain credibility. Do not overlook the emotional side of bluffing. Casual opponents often react strongly to perceived bluffs. If they catch you once, they may call you down lighter in the future, convinced you are bluffing again. This makes future bluffs more dangerous, but also increases the value of your strong hands. If you are caught bluffing, shift back to straightforward value betting, and let opponents pay you off when they overreact. Bluffing is not just about the chips you win immediately, but also about the image you create, and how that image affects future pots. Bluffing also requires emotional steadiness on your part. When a bluff is called, it can feel embarrassing or frustrating. Many players respond by either giving up bluffing entirely or by bluffing more recklessly to win back their lost chips. Neither response is useful. Accept that some bluffs will fail and treat each as part of the larger game. The goal is not perfection but balance, finding those few spots where a bluff adds value to your overall strategy. Finally, remember that bluffing should be the spice of your strategy, not the main ingredient. In small field home tournaments, most of your profit will come from value betting, exploiting opponents who call too often. Bluffing works best as a selective tool, used against the right opponents, on the right boards, and at the right times. By keeping your bluffs rare and well chosen, you preserve your stack and maintain credibility when it matters most. Bluffing in small field home tournaments is about precision, not frequency. Choose boards that make sense for your story. Target opponents who can fold and avoid those who cannot. Use blockers to add credibility and favor semi-bluffs with drawing equity over pure bluffs with no chance to improve. Save bluffs for heads-up pots rather than multi-way situations, and plan them consistently across streets. Accept that some bluffs will fail, but stay calm and use the image they create to your advantage later. Above all, keep bluffing as a small part of your overall approach, seasoning rather than foundation. In casual games where opponents call too much, restraint in bluffing is often the greatest strength you can show. Chapter Dosi: Stack Size Awareness. In tournament poker, stack size is more than just a count of chips. It is the lens through which every decision must be made. Your card's position and opponents all matter, but none of these can be understood without first considering how many big blinds you and your opponents have in front of you. In small field home tournaments with shallow structures, stack size awareness becomes even more important. Blinds rise quickly, and effective stacks shorten before many players realize it. By learning how to adjust your play based on stack depth, you give yourself the calm confidence to navigate each stage of the game with clarity. Stack size is usually measured in big blinds rather than raw chip counts. This makes comparisons simple and keeps perspective on how many hands you can afford to wait before blinds consume your stack. A stack of 3,000 chips may sound comfortable, but if blinds are 200 and 400, you have less than 8 big blinds, which is dangerously short. Always convert your stack into big blinds, and make it a habit to do the same for your opponents. This frame of reference grounds your decisions in the realities of the tournament. Let us begin with deep stacks, generally considered 25 big blinds or more in home tournaments. With this depth, you have room to open raise with a variety of hands, call speculative holdings in position, and navigate multi-street post-flop play. Deep stacks allow for creativity, but they also demand discipline. The temptation to chase weak draws grows when you feel you have plenty of chips, yet wasting big blinds early erodes the cushion that protects you later. With deep stacks, your goal should be steady accumulation. Raise strong hands confidently, call with suited connectors or medium pairs when the price is right, and pressure weaker players who limp too often. Avoid overcommitting with one pair when pots grow large. Deep stacks offer opportunity, but they can vanish quickly if treated carelessly. Medium stacks between 10 and 25 big blinds are the most common in small field tournaments. With blinds rising every 15 to 20 minutes, many players find themselves in this zone for most of the game. Here you must tighten your decisions and focus on maximizing fold equity. Open raising should be more selective, as calling a 3-bet often commits too much of your stack. Instead, you should look for spots to push all in over raises, or to move in directly when first to act. This pressure exploits the fear opponents feel about risking their own tournament lives. Semi-bluffs become less effective in this range, because you lack the chips to maneuver if called. Value hands should be played assertively, often moving all in pre-flop or on the flop, to avoid difficult turn and river decisions. With a medium stack, hesitation is costly. Clarity and conviction define your best plays. Short stacks, 10 big blinds or fewer, demand an even simpler approach. At this depth, your only real tools are folding or moving all in. Limping or calling raises consumes too much of your limited stack, without giving you fold equity. The mathematics of shove or fold are clear, and though the decisions can feel tense, they are often straightforward. With a short stack, you must recognize when your fold equity is still meaningful. Moving all in from the button with a hand like King 9 suited may win the blinds outright, adding 20% to your stack. Waiting too long erodes this equity. If you allow your stack to fall to 3 or 4 big blinds, opponents will call more often, and your fold equity disappears. Short stack play is about survival, but it is also about seizing the last leverage your chips give you. Awareness of stack sizes must extend beyond your own. Every decision you make should consider the stacks of the players involved. If a large stack raises in front of you, calling lightly with a medium stack can be dangerous, because they can pressure you relentlessly. Conversely, when facing a raise from another medium stack, your all-in shove carries more weight, since they risk their tournament life if they call and lose. Against short stacks, be cautious about opening weak hands, as their shove may force you into a difficult decision. Understanding relative stack sizes helps you avoid traps and target opportunities. Let us consider some examples. You have 18 big blinds on the button, and it folds to you with ace-10 offsuit. With antes in play, this is an ideal spot to move all in. The blinds must risk significant portions of their stacks to call, and many of their hands will fold, giving you immediate profit. Now imagine you have the same hand, with 35 big blinds. An all-in shove would be excessive. Instead, you raise normally, preserving flexibility and allowing yourself to navigate the flop. Awareness of your stack transforms the same hand into entirely different decisions. Another example, you hold pocket sixes with 22 big blinds in middle position. A loose player raises to 3 big blinds. Calling here consumes too much of your stack and leaves you with awkward post-flop decisions. Shoving all in is stronger. If they fold, you win chips outright. If they call with 2 overcards, you are often flipping with reasonable equity. By contrast, with 40 big blinds, shoving would be unnecessary. Calling in position or re-raising smaller would give you better options. Again, stack size dictates your best line. Stack size awareness also applies at the final table. When payouts approach, players adjust their ranges based on the stacks around them. A medium stack facing shorter stacks may fold more often, waiting for others to bust and secure a higher finish. A large stack can exploit this, raising frequently to pressure the medium stacks who fear elimination. Short stacks near the bubble may tighten too much, allowing you to steal blinds with wider ranges. By reading not only your own stack, but also the distribution across the table, you identify moments to apply pressure or moments to wait calmly. One subtle but important element is the cost of an orbit. As blinds rise, calculate how many chips you lose if you fold every hand for one full rotation. In a home game with blinds at 200 and 400 and a 400 big blind ante, the cost per orbit can be 1,200 chips. With a 6,000 chip stack, that is only 5 orbits before you are blinded out. Awareness of this cost forces action when your stack is dwindling, preventing the mistake of waiting too long for perfect cards. Many casual players bust not because they played too loose, but because they played too tight and allowed the blinds to consume them. Another factor is how stack size affects post-flop play. With deep stacks, you can continuation bet smaller and still have room to maneuver if called. With medium stacks, bets often commit you more deeply, so your decisions must be clearer. With short stacks, post-flop play almost disappears, as most chips go in preflop or on the flop. Recognizing the level of post-flop freedom your stack allows prevents you from making bets that leave you trapped. Finally, stack size awareness ties directly into emotional steadiness. Short stacks create tension, and many players panic, shoving hands that are too weak or folding hands that are too strong. Large stacks create overconfidence, leading to careless calls or speculative plays that drain chips. By staying grounded in the reality of your stack, you resist these emotional swings. You see your chips not as a measure of fortune or frustration, but as tools that shape your next decisions. Stack size awareness is the compass that guides every choice in tournament poker. Deep stacks allow creativity, but demand discipline. Medium stacks require clarity and conviction, with an emphasis on fold equity. Short stacks reduce the game to simple, direct decisions, where survival depends on timely shoves. Relative stack sizes at the table influence your strategy as much as your own chips, shaping when to apply pressure and when to wait. The cost of an orbit, the leverage of fold equity, and the freedom of post-flop play all come back to this one measure. By grounding yourself in stack size awareness, you strip away uncertainty and replace it with calm direction. In small field home tournaments, where blinds rise quickly and every chip counts, this awareness may be the most important skill you can bring to the table. Chapter 13. Transition to the mid-game. Every tournament has a rhythm. The early levels are slow and cautious, the late stages are tense and decisive, and in between lies the transition to the mid-game. In small field home tournaments, this transition arrives sooner than many players expect. Blinds rise quickly, stacks shrink relative to the pot, and opponents begin to fall away. Recognizing when the mid-game begins and how to adjust is an essential skill. By shifting gears calmly and deliberately, you can move through this stage with confidence and prepare for the challenges that lie ahead. The mid-game usually begins once a few players have been eliminated and the average stack has dropped below 30 big blinds. In a 16-player home tournament, this may happen within the first hour. Blinds of 200 and 400 or 300 and 600 often mark the turning point. At this stage, the luxury of folding endlessly in search of premium cards begins to fade. You must look for opportunities to accumulate chips, or you risk being blinded into a short stack with little room to maneuver. One of the most important adjustments in the mid-game is widening your opening range. In the early stages, patience and tight play were rewarded, as loose opponents eliminated themselves. In the mid-game, however, the cost of blinds becomes more significant. Opening with a wider selection of hands in late position, such as suited connectors, medium pairs, and Broadway combinations, allows you to pick up blinds and antes that meaningfully add to your stack. These small wins keep you afloat without relying solely on premium holdings. Stealing blinds is not just about hand selection, but also about table awareness. Notice which players in the blinds are folding often. If the small blind has surrendered repeatedly, raising from the button with a wide range becomes profitable. Conversely, if the big blind is defending aggressively, adjust by tightening your opens or sizing your raises larger to discourage loose calls. Each orbit offers chances to win uncontested pots, and these small gains accumulate quickly. Rest stealing is another tool that becomes relevant in the mid-game. When an aggressive player raises too frequently, shoving all in with a medium stack can turn their looseness into your advantage. For example, if you hold ace-jack suited with 18 big blinds and a loose player opens from middle position, an all-in shove puts them to a difficult decision. Many of their opens are weak and will fold, while your hand plays well if called. Rest stealing punishes players who raise too often without strong holdings, while also giving you the chance to double up when your hand is ahead. Post-flop play also changes in the mid-game. With shallower stacks, the margin for error decreases. Continuation bets should be smaller and more selective, as committing chips unnecessarily can put you at risk. Pot control remains important, but you must also recognize when to commit fully with strong hands. One pair may not always be enough to risk your stack, but top pair, top kicker, or an overpair often justify moving forward decisively. The key is clarity. Decide whether you are committed before you bet, and avoid spots where hesitation leads to chip loss. Table dynamics become more important in this stage. Pay attention to which players are tightening as their stacks shrink, and which are loosening in an attempt to build chips. Many casual players misjudge this transition. Some continue playing too tightly, waiting for perfect hands until their stacks are too short to matter. Others swing too far in the opposite direction, shoving recklessly and busting before the final table. By observing these patterns, you can target the timid players with steals and trap the reckless ones with strong holdings. The mid-game also tests emotional steadiness. Blinds rise, pots grow larger, and mistakes carry more weight. It is easy to feel pressured into action or discouraged when your stack shrinks. Preparation is your anchor. Remember that the mid-game is not about surviving endlessly, nor about gambling recklessly. It is about navigating the shift with balance, seizing opportunities to grow, while protecting yourself from unnecessary risk. Stack size awareness is especially crucial here. If you hold more than 25 big blinds, you can continue to raise and play post-flop. Between 10 and 25 big blinds, look for spots to shove directly or to rest steal. Below 10 big blinds, survival depends on well-timed all-ins. Knowing where you stand at every moment prevents hesitation and ensures that your decisions match your stack reality. An example can help illustrate this stage. Imagine you begin with 25 big blinds and are on the cutoff with King 10 suited. Everyone folds to you. In the early game, this might have been a fold, as there was no need to risk chips on a marginal hand. In the mid-game, however, raising here is correct. The blinds are valuable, and your hand has playability if called. If the button or blinds shove, you can release and lose little. By raising, you give yourself a chance to win outright, or to play with initiative. This kind of adjustment transforms the mid-game from a passive wait into an active climb. The transition to the mid-game is about shifting gears smoothly. You can no longer sit back waiting for only the strongest hands, nor can you throw caution aside. Instead, widen your opening ranges in position, steal blinds, and re-steal against frequent raises. Protect your stack with discipline, but do not let it dwindle through inactivity. Read the table, target timid players, and trap the reckless. Above all, remain calm. The mid-game is not the finish line, but the bridge that carries you toward the final table. By crossing it with awareness and balance, you give yourself the best chance to arrive at the endgame prepared and confident. Chapter 14. Applying pressure as the field shrinks. As a home tournament moves from the mid-stages toward the final table, the number of players dwindles, blinds rise, and the pressure intensifies. In a small field game with 16 players or fewer, this shrinking phase comes quickly. Within just a few levels, the room may go from 2 tables of 8 to a single table of survivors. At this point, applying pressure becomes one of the most powerful tools you can use. Understanding when and how to press your advantage against certain stacks is the difference between coasting quietly and building the momentum that carries you to the endgame. The central idea of pressure is that not all stacks are equal. Some players are comfortable, some are desperate, and others are caught in the middle. The large stack has the freedom to open more hands and lean on opponents who are fearful of elimination. The short stack must eventually commit and has little flexibility. The medium stacks, however, are the most vulnerable. They are big enough to be worth targeting, but not big enough to defend recklessly. Many players in this zone fold too often, hoping to outlast others. By recognizing these dynamics, you can tailor your pressure to exploit the exact psychology of the moment. Let us consider the large stack first. If you are fortunate enough to have accumulated more chips than anyone else, you have leverage that extends beyond your cards. Every time you raise, opponents must decide whether they are willing to risk their tournament life against you. Most players are reluctant to do so without very strong hands. This fear allows you to open wider ranges, especially in late position. Hands like King 9 suited or Jack 10 offsuit may not be premium, but they gain value when your stack size forces opponents to fold holdings they might otherwise defend. By pressing this advantage, you steadily grow even larger, turning the rich into the richer. The danger, of course, is overconfidence. Applying pressure as a big stack requires discipline. If you open every single hand, opponents will eventually fight back. Choose your spots, but recognize that your stack is a weapon, and use it wisely. Medium stacks are the true targets of pressure. Imagine blinds of 500 and 1,000, and a player has 15,000 chips, equal to 15 big blinds. They are not desperate yet, but they cannot afford to lose a confrontation. When you raise into their blinds with 35,000 chips behind, they must decide whether to risk most of their tournament life by defending. Many fold, preferring to wait for a clearer spot. This dynamic allows you to pick up blinds and antes repeatedly, padding your stack without ever seeing a flop. Pressure in these moments is not about reckless shoves. It is about calculated raises that exploit the fear of elimination. Over time, the medium stacks bleed chips, while your stack grows larger and stronger. Short stacks respond differently to pressure. At fewer than 10 big blinds, they know that waiting too long will blind them out. They are more likely to shove all in over your raises, because they have little to lose. Applying pressure against these players requires caution. Raising light into a short stack often invites a shove that forces you to fold and donate chips. Against the shortest stacks, tighten your opens. Instead, let them shove into you when you hold strong hands. The true profit against short stacks comes not from bullying them, but from catching their desperate moves with superior holdings. The cost of an orbit plays a large role in this phase. With blinds and antes consuming significant portions of stacks, players feel the pressure even if they are not involved in a hand. A medium stack losing 1 or 2 orbits without playing may see their stack shrink from 20 big blinds to 12. This fear creates hesitation. You can exploit this by raising more frequently in late position, especially if the blinds are medium stacks trying to hang on. Each fold they make out of caution delivers chips to your stack. By contrast, when facing large stacks in the blinds, pressure is less effective, as they are more willing to defend. Adjust your targets accordingly. Another important tool is the continuation bet. In earlier stages, you used c-bets selectively to avoid bloating pots. As the field shrinks, c-bets become more powerful because players are more cautious. When you raise preflop and fire on dry boards, opponents often fold rather than risk their tournament life with marginal holdings. The fear of elimination amplifies the strength of your bets. However, you must still avoid reckless overuse. Bluffing too often against the wrong opponents will cost you. Focus on players who have already shown a tendency to fold under pressure. 3-betting is another way to apply pressure. When aggressive players open too often, re-raising all in can punish them. Suppose you have ace-jack suited with 18 big blinds, and an opponent with a similar stack raises from middle position. A 3-bet shove here pressures them to risk their tournament life. Many of their opens are weak and will fold. If called, your hand plays well against their range. Even when you are not the chip leader, leveraging your stack in this way can turn their aggression into your profit. Psychology is at the heart of this stage. As players see the final table approaching, they begin to think about survival. They want to make it to the payouts, or at least avoid being the next elimination. This mindset makes them fold hands they might otherwise play. You can sense this tension in their body language and their decisions. A player who normally defends their big blind may suddenly fold repeatedly. Another who raised often earlier now hesitates. By watching closely, you can sense who is tightening up under pressure and direct your aggression toward them. At the same time, be aware of reckless players who go the other direction. Some react to pressure by fighting back, shoving light out of frustration. Against these players, you must adjust by tightening your range and letting them make mistakes. Patience against the reckless and aggression against the timid is the formula for thriving as the field shrinks. Applying pressure is not just about winning blinds. It is also about setting up future situations. By raising frequently in position, you build an image of aggression. Later, when you finally pick up a premium hand, opponents may assume you are bullying again and call or shove lighter than they should. In this way, the pressure you apply now pays dividends in later confrontations. Let us consider a full example. You are on the button with Queen 10 suited, holding 40 big blinds. The cutoff has 14 big blinds and folds. You raise to 2.5 big blinds. The blinds both have 12 to 15 big blinds. Neither wants to risk their stack against your larger one. They fold, and you collect the blinds and antes. On the next orbit, you raise again, with 9-8 suited. Once more, they fold. Over 2 hands, you have added nearly 5 big blinds to your stack, without seeing a flop. This steady accumulation is how pressure builds momentum. It is not about massive bluffs or dramatic all-ins. It is about persistent, targeted raises that exploit opponents' fear. The danger of applying pressure is overextending. If you push too often against the wrong players, they will adjust. A medium stack may eventually decide they cannot be bullied and call you down with a strong hand. A large stack may re-raise, forcing you to release your aggression. Discipline is required. Pressure works best when applied selectively, when opponents are most likely to fold. Use your observations to choose moments carefully, rather than pressing relentlessly without thought. Applying pressure as the field shrinks is about exploiting the psychology of survival. Large stacks can lean on others, medium stacks fear elimination, and short stacks must eventually shove. By targeting the medium stacks with frequent raises, avoiding unnecessary battles with short stacks, and adjusting to reckless or timid opponents, you create steady growth. Continuation bets, 3-bet shoves, and late position opens all become tools for leveraging your stack. Above all, apply pressure with discipline, not recklessness. The goal is not to dominate every hand, but to build steadily, forcing others into mistakes as their stacks dwindle. In small field home tournaments, where blinds rise quickly and tension runs high, calm and thoughtful pressure often marks the difference between reaching the final table comfortably and clinging on by a thread. Chapter 15: Surviving with a Short Stack. Every poker player, no matter how skilled, eventually faces the challenge of a short stack. In a home tournament with 16 players or fewer, blinds rise quickly, and even the most disciplined player can find their stack reduced to dangerous territory. Short stack play is not about despair. It is about clarity. With fewer chips, your options become simpler, and your decisions become more defined. Surviving with a short stack requires discipline, awareness, and the calm acceptance that your fate may come down to one decisive shove. A short stack is usually defined as 10 big blinds or fewer. At this depth, limping, calling, and speculative plays lose their effectiveness. The mathematics of tournament poker make it clear. If you call a raise with 8 big blinds behind, you are nearly committed to any continuation bet, yet you enter the pot without initiative. By contrast, moving all in creates fold equity, the chance to win the pot outright without a showdown. Fold equity is the lifeline of the short stack. It is what allows you to turn a weak position into survival, or even growth. The first principle of short stack survival is recognizing when to move all in. Waiting endlessly for premium hands is rarely the right choice. Blinds and antes eat away quickly, and each orbit can consume a significant portion of your remaining chips. Instead, you must identify spots where your shove has a good chance of forcing folds, while still holding reasonable equity if called. Late position is often best for this. If the action folds to you on the button with 7 or 8 big blinds, many hands become shovable. King 9 suited, Queen Jack offsuit, or even small pairs, all gain strength when your fold equity is high. By contrast, shoving from early position requires stronger holdings, as more players remain to act, and the chance of a call increases. Position is critical. On the button, nearly any ace becomes a shove, with 8 or fewer big blinds. Even weak-suited kings can be profitable, as the blinds must risk a large portion of their stacks to call. In the cutoff, you can still shove fairly wide, though slightly tighter than the button. From early position, discipline is required. Hands like ace-jack, ace-queen, or medium pairs are worth moving in, but weaker holdings should often be folded, as the risk of running into strong hands is greater. Stack awareness must extend beyond your own. If players behind you have deep stacks, they may be more inclined to call your shove, reducing your fold equity. If they are also short, they may hesitate, fearing their own elimination. Identifying who is likely to call and who is likely to fold helps you choose the best spots. For example, shoving into a big blind who is distracted or folding often is more profitable than shoving into a player who has been eager to gamble. Another principle is the power of the resteal. Suppose a loose player raises frequently in late position, and you have 10 big blinds in the small blind with ace-10 suited. Moving all in here pressures them to fold their weak raises. If they do call, your hand is often ahead, or flipping with reasonable equity. Resteals work best against players who raise too wide and can fold. Against calling stations who never release their hands, shoving lighter is more dangerous. Again, awareness of opponent tendencies is the foundation of survival. Short stack play also benefits from understanding ranges. Many guides offer charts of profitable shoves with fewer than 10 big blinds. While you do not need to memorize them exactly, the principle is clear. As your stack shrinks, your shoving range widens. With 8 big blinds on the button, almost any ace, any pair, and most Broadway cards become profitable. With 5 big blinds, the situation grows desperate, and nearly any 2 reasonable cards must be considered. The earlier you act, the tighter you must be, but the shorter your stack, the more aggressive you must become. Let us consider an example. You have 9 big blinds on the button, and everyone folds to you. You look down at King-8 suited. This is a clear shove. The blinds may fold, giving you an immediate 20% boost to your stack. Even if they call, you often have 2 live cards, or some equity. Now imagine instead that you fold, hoping for a better hand. By the next orbit, your stack has dropped to 7 big blinds, and the opportunity is less profitable. Each missed chance reduces your fold equity and makes survival harder. The lesson is that waiting too long often harms more than it helps. Short stack play is not only about shoving. It is also about mindset. Many players panic when their chips dwindle. They shove recklessly with weak hands out of frustration, or they tighten so much that they blind out without ever playing. Calm acceptance is the key. A short stack does not mean you are doomed. Many tournaments have been won by players who survived desperate situations and rebuilt through well-timed shoves. The important thing is to approach each decision with clarity, not fear. Another element is recognizing when to gamble. Sometimes, survival requires taking risks with less than premium holdings. Calling all in from the big blind, with 5 big blinds and Queen-10 suited, may not feel ideal, but if the math is correct and your fold equity is gone, taking the gamble is necessary. By accepting this reality, you avoid paralysis and give yourself the best chance to double up. Survival is not about avoiding elimination entirely. It is about maximizing your chances to stay alive long enough for new opportunities to appear. Short stack survival also involves reading the table. If players are folding often to shoves, you can widen your range and move in more frequently. If they are calling light, tighten your range and wait for stronger holdings. Each table is different, and short stack play is most effective when tailored to the specific tendencies of your opponents. Awareness and adjustment go hand in hand. One of the overlooked strengths of a short stack is the image it creates. Many opponents assume short stacks are desperate and will shove wide. This assumption can work in your favor. When you finally pick up a premium hand, such as pocket aces or ace-king, your shove may be called by weaker holdings, doubling you up. By surviving long enough to find these spots, you can turn your short stack into a tool that invites mistakes from others. Emotional steadiness is the thread that ties it all together. Short stack situations can feel tense, but letting anxiety dictate your choices is harmful. Calmly evaluate your position, your stack, and the tendencies of those around you. Accept that sometimes you will shove and lose, even when you made the correct decision. Survival is about playing the math, not about controlling the outcome. By staying steady, you protect yourself from rash moves that end your run prematurely. Surviving with a short stack is about clarity, discipline, and calm acceptance. Move all in rather than limp or call. Use fold equity while you still have it, and recognize when to widen your range as your stack shrinks. Target your shoves carefully, exploiting loose raises and folding stations differently. Embrace re-steals when the opportunity is right, and plan your ranges by position and stack depth. Above all, remain emotionally steady. Short stacks are part of tournament life, not a sign of failure. By approaching them with calm discipline, you give yourself the best chance to survive, rebuild, and continue your path toward the final table. Chapter 16. Approaching the final table. In a small field home tournament, the path to the final table arrives quickly. With only 16 players or fewer at the start, half the field may already be eliminated after just a few levels. What remains is a mix of survivors, some with large stacks who have built steadily, others hanging on with short stacks, and several in between trying to secure their place at the endgame. Approaching the final table requires more than just solid technical play. It calls for patience, awareness, and an understanding of how psychology shifts as the finish line comes into view. The first change you will notice is the atmosphere. Players who were relaxed and conversational earlier often grow quieter as the stakes feel more real. Even in a home game, the final table carries weight. It represents not only the chance to win chips, but also bragging rights among friends or family. This change in atmosphere creates both caution and opportunity. Some players will tighten up, fearful of busting before the final stage. Others will grow restless, eager to gamble and double up before the blinds consume them. By paying attention to these shifts, you can decide who to pressure and who to avoid. Patience is your first ally. With only a few eliminations left before the table consolidates, many players make the mistake of forcing the action. They shove light or call with weak hands, desperate to build a stack before the next level. This urgency often leads to elimination. By contrast, staying patient allows you to capitalize on their mistakes. You do not need to win every pot. You need to survive to the stage where decisions become clearer and payoffs grow larger. Stack size awareness continues to guide your choices. Large stacks approaching the final table have the freedom to raise more often, leaning on players who are trying to hang on. Medium stacks, however, are the most vulnerable. They do not want to risk elimination, but they also cannot afford to fold endlessly. These players often make the tightest folds, allowing you to pick up blinds and antes with well-timed raises. Short stacks remain unpredictable. They may shove all in with any two reasonable cards, hoping to double up. Against them, avoid opening too light. Let them shove into you when you have stronger holdings. Position remains critical. In late position, you can raise more hands, targeting the blinds who are often hesitant at this stage. On the button or cutoff, hands like King 10 suited, Queen Jack offsuit, or even Ace 5 suited, can be raised profitably. From early position, tighten your range, focusing on stronger holdings. The reason is simple. With several players waiting to act, the chance of running into resistance increases, and busting just short of the final table is a costly mistake. Emotional steadiness is also essential. As the final table nears, the tension builds. Players glance at the clock, count the stacks, and speculate on who will bust next. Do not let this tension pull you out of rhythm. Focus on your own decisions. Treat each hand as part of the process, not as a dramatic moment. Calm thinking allows you to continue making strong choices while others tighten up or panic. One useful strategy during this phase is selective aggression. You do not need to apply pressure every orbit, but when the right spot arises, take it. For example, if you notice that the big blind has folded several times in a row, a raise from late position with a wide range becomes profitable. If a medium stack folds to nearly every open, target them with repeated raises. These small accumulations keep your stack healthy without exposing you to unnecessary risks. It is also important to prepare mentally for the shift in dynamics once the final table begins. Blinds are larger, pay jumps may be introduced, and the spotlight of focus is sharper. Approaching the final table is not about gambling recklessly to arrive with the biggest stack. It is about arriving with enough chips, enough information, and enough composure to succeed once you are there. Even an average stack can be powerful if you are prepared to use it wisely. Let us consider an example. You have 20 big blinds with 9 players left, and only one more elimination before the final table is set. A short stack of 6 big blinds shoves all in from early position. You are in middle position with pocket eights. This is a clear call. If you win, your stack grows to a more comfortable size. If you lose, you still have chips to continue. Now imagine the same shove happens, but you hold King Jack offsuit. This decision is closer. While King Jack may be ahead of their shoving range, busting just before the final table with a marginal hand is rarely worth the risk. Folding preserves your stack and your chance to reach the final stage. Awareness of timing and context shapes decisions as much as card strength. Approaching the final table is about patience, awareness, and balance. Recognize the shifts in atmosphere as players grow cautious or restless. Use your stack wisely, pressing on medium stacks while avoiding unnecessary confrontations with desperate short stacks. Adjust your ranges based on position and apply selective aggression when the moment is right. Above all, remain calm. The final table is not just the next step. It is the stage where the tournament is decided. By approaching it with steadiness and preparation, you ensure that when the moment arrives, you are ready to meet it with confidence. Chapter 17. Playing 4 and 3-handed. As the field shrinks to the last few players, the game changes dramatically. In a small field home tournament, reaching 4-handed or 3-handed play is already a significant achievement. By this stage, blinds are large, stacks are shallow relative to the pot, and every hand carries weight. The patience that served you well in the early game must now give way to activity. The fewer the players, the wider the ranges, and the more often you must get involved. Playing well in these short table situations is about understanding how values shift, how pressure intensifies, and how to balance aggression with caution. The first major shift is in hand value. In full table play, Hands like King 10 offsuit or Ace 5 suited are often folded from early position. With only 4 or 3 players at the table, these same hands gain new strength. The chance of someone holding a premium hand is much smaller, and the blinds come around so quickly that waiting for aces or kings is no longer realistic. If you fold too often in short-handed play, the blinds will eat away at your stack, leaving you with no chance to win. Except that hands once considered marginal are now worth raising or defending. Position remains critical, but with fewer players, its importance becomes magnified. The button, which was already the most powerful seat, now controls the game. From the button, you should raise aggressively with a wide range, pressuring the blinds to either surrender or commit significant portions of their stacks. Hands like Queen 9 suited, Jack 10 offsuit, and even weaker suited aces become profitable raises. From the small blind, strategy becomes more complex. You are out of position for the entire hand, but with only one opponent to act behind you, shoving or raising aggressively often makes sense. The big blind, on the other hand, must defend wider. If you fold too often from the big blind in short-handed play, you allow the button and small blind to steal relentlessly. By calling or shoving with a wider range, you protect your stack and force opponents to think twice before raising every hand. Aggression is the defining trait of short-handed success. With blinds rising quickly, the cost of inaction is severe. You cannot wait endlessly for strong hands. Instead, you must look for opportunities to raise, re-raise, and put pressure on opponents who hesitate. This does not mean playing recklessly. It means recognizing that in 4- and 3-handed play, survival depends on actively contesting pots. The players who retreat into caution at this stage often blind out quietly, finishing in 3rd or 4th place without ever challenging for the win. Stack size awareness continues to shape your decisions. With 20 or more big blinds, you can raise and play post-flop with some flexibility. With 10 to 20 big blinds, your strategy should include many all-in shoves, especially when facing aggressive raises. With fewer than 10 big blinds, shove or fold becomes the only realistic option. Importantly, the value of shove ranges widens considerably in short-handed play. From the button with 12 big blinds, almost any ace, most kings, and many suited connectors become profitable shoves. The blinds must risk significant portions of their own stacks to call, and unless they hold premium hands, they will often fold. Recognizing these mathematical realities allows you to survive and accumulate chips, even without strong cards. Psychology plays a large role in short-handed play. Many casual players become uncomfortable when the game narrows to just a few opponents. They may feel exposed, unsure of which hands to play, and reluctant to shove without premium holdings. This fear creates opportunity. By raising more frequently, you can force them into difficult decisions. When they fold too often, you collect blinds and antes steadily. On the other side, some players respond by becoming overly aggressive, raising or shoving almost every hand. Against these opponents, patience becomes your ally. Let them build pots with weak holdings, and when you finally hold a strong hand, call or shove to punish their recklessness. Continuation betting remains a powerful tool in short-handed play, but it should be adjusted carefully. With ranges much wider, opponents will miss the flop more often, making small continuation bets effective. However, because players also defend more aggressively, you cannot expect every bet to succeed. Balance your continuation bets with checks, especially when you hold medium-strength hands that benefit from pot control. A queen-high flop may hit a large portion of both ranges, making aggressive continuation bets less effective. On dry boards, however, continuation bets will often win the pot outright. Let us consider an example. You are four-handed with 15 big blinds on the button. Everyone folds to you, and you hold Jack-9 suited. This is an easy raise, and in many cases, an all-in shove is also profitable. If the blinds fold, you gain a meaningful increase to your stack. If the small blind shoves with ace-6 offsuit, you still have reasonable equity. By playing this hand aggressively, you protect yourself from being blinded down. Folding in this spot, waiting for aces, would mean giving up a profitable opportunity. Now imagine a three-handed situation. You are in the small blind with 12 big blinds and hold King-8 offsuit. The button folds, and you must decide whether to shove or fold. Shoving here is often correct. The big blind must call with a wide range, but many of their holdings will be weaker. Even if called, you are rarely dominated. If they fold, you gain immediate chips, keeping your stack alive. These kinds of decisions define three-handed play. The goal is not to wait for perfection, but to act when the math and psychology align. Short-handed play also demands awareness of image. If you have been raising often, opponents may grow suspicious and begin calling or shoving lighter. In that case, tighten slightly and value bet more. If you have been quiet, use that image to steal blinds with unexpected raises. Image shifts quickly in four- and three-handed games, where every hand is noticed. Use this to your advantage by staying one step ahead of how you are perceived. Multi-street planning remains important, though the shallowness of stacks often reduces the number of streets played. With 15 big blinds effective, many hands will be decided by the turn, or even pre-flop. Still, thinking ahead gives you clarity. If you raise pre-flop with ace-jack and are called, decide in advance which flops you will continuation bet, and which you will check. If you shove from the small blind and get called, accept calmly that the outcome is now in the hands of the deck. Planning ahead prevents hesitation and keeps your emotions steady. Finally, remember that short-handed play is not about survival alone. It is about setting yourself up to win. Third place may feel satisfying, but the difference between finishing third and finishing first is often determined by who adjusts best in these final stages. Embrace the wider ranges, the faster pace, and the increased pressure. Trust that by playing actively and thoughtfully, you give yourself the best chance to rise from one of the last survivors to the champion of the table. Playing four- and three-handed requires a complete shift in mindset. Hand values expand, position grows even more powerful, and aggression becomes essential. Stack size awareness defines your strategy, with shoves becoming more frequent as stacks shrink. Psychology plays a larger role, as some opponents tighten while others grow reckless. Continuation bets remain useful, but must be balanced. Image shifts quickly, and multi-street planning provides calm direction. By embracing these adjustments, you move through the most intense stage of the tournament with confidence. In small field home games, mastering this short-handed play often makes the difference between a deep run and a memorable win. Chapter 18: Heads-Up Strategy. When a small field home tournament narrows to the final two players, the game becomes something entirely different. Heads-up play is not just a continuation of what came before. It is its own form of poker, faster, wider, and more psychological than any earlier stage. With only one opponent, every hand is a battle, and the blinds come around so quickly that you cannot afford to wait. Success in heads-up play comes from understanding how values shift, how ranges expand, and how to apply pressure while maintaining discipline. The first shift you must accept is that hand values increase dramatically. In a full table game, hands like King 5 offsuit or Ace 2 offsuit are often folded without hesitation. In heads-up play, these same hands become strong contenders. The reason is simple. With only 2 players, the chance that your opponent holds a premium hand is very small. Ace high is often the best hand. A single pair is frequently enough to win. If you cling to the tighter standards of full table play, you will be blinded away. To succeed, you must expand your range and embrace the reality that many hands are good enough to play. Position is even more powerful in heads-up play than at any other stage. The button acts first pre-flop, but then acts last on every post-flop street, giving a built-in advantage. As the button, you should raise almost every hand. Suited connectors, weak aces, medium kings, and even low cards with connectivity can all be raised profitably. The small blind and button are the same seat, and because you act last after the flop, you hold a consistent edge. The big blind, on the other hand, must defend with a wide range. Folding too often from the big blind allows the button to steal relentlessly. Defending does not always mean calling. Often it means shoving all in with hands that have decent equity. The balance between button aggression and big blind defense defines much of heads-up strategy. Aggression is the heart of this stage. With only 2 players, passivity is punished quickly. If you fold too often, the blinds drain your stack. If you check too much, your opponent will bet and take pot after pot. You must be the aggressor as often as possible. Raise from the button. Bet when you have initiative. Shove when your stack size demands it. At the same time, aggression must be controlled. Wild shoves with poor hands will quickly end your tournament. The key is to combine frequent activity with thoughtful selectivity, ensuring that you are always the one applying pressure, but never recklessly. Stack size awareness continues to guide your play. With more than 20 big blinds, you can open raise small and play post-flop more comfortably. Between 10 and 20 big blinds, shoving all in becomes a standard weapon, especially from the button. With fewer than 10 big blinds, shove or fold is almost always the correct approach. The key difference in heads-up play is that ranges widen dramatically. With 12 big blinds on the button, hands like Jack 7 suited, Queen 8 offsuit, or any ace become profitable shoves. The blinds are so large relative to stacks that waiting for premium hands is not realistic. Fold equity is your ally, and you must use it while you still have it. Continuation betting remains important, but it requires balance. With ranges so wide, both you and your opponent will miss the flop often. Betting small, perhaps 1/3 or half the pot, can win many hands outright. However, you must avoid being predictable. If you co-bet every flop, your opponent will adjust and start calling or raising light. Mix in checks, especially on coordinated boards where your hand has little equity. By varying your approach, you remain difficult to read and harder to exploit. Semi-bluffs are especially powerful in heads-up play. With so many weak hands in both ranges, a straight draw, flush draw, or even overcards provide strong opportunities to apply pressure. When you bet or raise with a draw, you give yourself 2 ways to win. Your opponent may fold, or you may hit your hand. This dual equity makes semi-bluffs profitable, especially when stacks are shallow and fold equity is high. Pure bluffs, on the other hand, should be rare. Betting with no equity at all risks your limited chips without backup. Save these moves for very specific spots, such as scare cards that dramatically change the board. Psychology plays an even larger role in heads-up than at any other stage. With only one opponent, every decision becomes personal. You see every hand they play, and they see every hand you play. Patterns emerge quickly. If you raise every button, your opponent will notice. If you fold too often from the big blind, they will exploit you. Adjusting to their tendencies is the essence of heads-up play. Against cautious opponents, ramp up your aggression, stealing relentlessly until they push back. Against reckless opponents who shove often, tighten your range and let them hang themselves. The constant adjustment, back and forth, is what makes heads-up poker both challenging and rewarding. Let us consider a practical example. You are heads up with 15 big blinds, holding King 9 suited on the button. You raise, and the big blind calls. The flop comes Queen 7-3 rainbow. Your opponent checks. This is a good spot for a continuation bet. You likely missed the board, but so did they. A small bet may win the pot outright. If they call, you still have 2 overcards and backdoor possibilities. Now imagine the same situation, but the flop comes Queen Jack 10 with 2 hearts. This board is highly coordinated and likely to have hit both ranges. Betting here risks too much, as your opponent will often continue. Checking back preserves your stack and allows you to re-evaluate on the turn. The difference lies in reading the board and adjusting accordingly. Another example highlights the importance of shoving ranges. You have 9 big blinds on the button, with Ace-4 offsuit. This is a clear shove. Your opponent in the big blind must risk a significant portion of their stack to call, and many of their hands will fold. Even if they call with a hand like King-Queen, you are not far behind. Waiting for a better hand in this spot often leads to disaster, as your stack will shrink further and your fold equity will vanish. Heads-up survival depends on recognizing these profitable shoves and acting decisively. Emotional steadiness is critical in heads-up play. The swings are faster, the pots are larger relative to stacks, and variance plays a stronger role. You may shove correctly and lose to a weaker hand. You may call correctly and watch an opponent hit a lucky river. Accept these outcomes as part of the game. What matters is making the correct decisions consistently. By staying calm, you preserve your ability to adjust and keep pressing forward, rather than tilting into reckless mistakes. Finally, remember that heads-up play is the stage where champions are made. Reaching this point means you have already navigated the field, survived the pressure, and adjusted through many phases. Now the challenge is distilled to its purest form, you and one opponent, trading decisions until one remains. Embrace the freedom of wider ranges. Use position to your advantage. Apply aggression with clarity and adjust constantly to your opponent's style. By combining technical understanding with emotional calm, you give yourself the best chance to finish, not just as a survivor, but as the winner. Heads-up strategy is about expansion, aggression, and adjustment. Hand values increase, ranges widen, and position grows even more powerful. Stack size awareness dictates whether you raise, shove, or fold. Continuation bets and semi-bluffs remain useful tools, but they must be balanced with checks and patience. Psychology takes center stage, as you read and adapt to your opponent's tendencies. Above all, stay calm. In the fast-focused world of heads-up play, steady decisions matter more than luck, in any single hand. By mastering this final stage, you complete the journey of the tournament and give yourself the best chance to walk away with the win. Chapter 19. Emotional Control. Late in the game. Poker tournaments test more than your technical skill. They test your patience, your ability to adapt, and most of all, your emotional steadiness. In the late stages of a small field home tournament, emotions often run high. The blinds are large, stacks are shallow, and each decision can mean the difference between survival and elimination. The atmosphere is charged. Friends who were laughing earlier may now sit in silence, focused only on the chips in front of them. At this point, emotional control is not just an advantage. It is a necessity. The first challenge is managing nerves. Deep in a tournament, players often feel their pulse quicken as pots grow larger. A simple pre-flop raise carries more weight than it did earlier, because the blinds represent a significant percentage of a stack. Many casual players begin to second-guess themselves, folding hands they would normally play, or calling with hands they should fold. Emotional control means slowing down your thought process. Take a breath, consider the stack sizes, and return to the fundamentals. Is your hand strong enough to play? Does your opponent's range make sense for their action? By grounding yourself in calm analysis, you prevent nerves from making decisions for you. Another challenge is fatigue. Even in a home tournament, several hours of steady play can wear on your focus. Tired players begin to act automatically. They fold without thinking, or they shove simply because they want the night to end. Fatigue is the quiet enemy of discipline. Managing it requires preparation. Drink water, take breaks when available, and remind yourself to stay present. Emotional control at this stage is as much about physical care as it is about mental care. A rested mind sees the board clearly. A tired mind gives chips away. Frustration is also common in the late game. Perhaps you lost a big pot to a lucky river, or perhaps you were forced to fold a strong hand after heavy pressure. Many players respond by tilting, pushing chips in recklessly to make up for the loss. Emotional control means accepting variance. Poker will always have swings. The best hand does not always hold up, and the weaker hand sometimes wins. By accepting this truth before you sit down, you free yourself from the cycle of frustration. Each hand is only part of a larger story. One unlucky card does not define your tournament, unless you allow it to by reacting poorly. Pride can be another danger. As the field narrows, the weight of reputation grows heavier. You may want to impress the table, to show that you can make a big bluff or a heroic call. This desire for recognition often leads to mistakes. Emotional control requires humility. You do not need to prove anything to your opponents. The goal is not to look brilliant, but to make steady, profitable decisions. The applause may fade, but the chips remain. Focus on results, not on appearance. Patience is perhaps the most valuable emotional trait late in the game. With only a few players left, the urge to force action can be overwhelming. You may feel that you need to gamble now, or risk being blinded away. Sometimes this is true, but often patience reveals better opportunities. Emotional control means waiting for spots that align with your stack size, position, and opponent tendencies. It means resisting the temptation to shove weak hands just to relieve pressure. By staying patient, you let other players make the mistakes born of desperation, while you remain steady. Awareness of opponents' emotions also becomes important. Late in the game, some players cannot hide their feelings. They slam chips when frustrated, sigh when folding, or hesitate when unsure. Recognizing these signs allows you to adjust. If an opponent is clearly tilted, tighten up and let them donate chips. If another is nervous and folding too much, apply pressure. Emotional control is not just about managing yourself. It is also about reading and responding to the emotions of others. Consider an example. You are three-handed and have just lost a big pot with pocket queens against ace-10 suited. The ace came on the river, cutting your stack in half. Frustration rises. Without emotional control, you might shove recklessly the next hand with jack-9 offsuit, hoping to double back up. Instead, you take a breath, remind yourself that you made the correct play, and wait for a better spot. 10 minutes later, you shove ace-king from the button and double up through the same opponent. The difference between elimination and survival was not the cards, but your ability to manage the emotional swing. Another example involves fatigue. You are at the final table, and it is late at night. Blinds are high, and every decision feels heavy. You begin folding automatically, not because your hands are weak, but because your mind is tired. Emotional control here means recognizing your fatigue and recentering. Take a sip of water, adjust your posture, and remind yourself to focus. By pulling yourself back into the present, you prevent tired habits from draining your stack. Emotional control late in the game is about managing nerves, fatigue, frustration, pride, and patience. It is about staying steady when others waver. Accept variance calmly, prepare for fatigue, and resist the temptation to prove yourself through risky plays. Focus on fundamentals, breathe through the tension, and remain present in each decision. By doing so, you protect your chips and give yourself the best chance to reach the finish line. In a small field home tournament, where every pot is magnified, emotional steadiness may be the trait that separates the champion from the rest. Chapter 20. Closing Reflections. Every tournament tells a story. It begins with a shuffle and a deal, passes through the tension of rising blinds, and ends with one player holding all the chips. In a small field home game, that story is more intimate. You remember each hand, each laugh, and each silence, as the field grew smaller. Reaching the closing reflections of this guide is a chance to look back not only on the technical lessons of tournament poker, but also on the broader lessons of patience, balance, and calmness that the game teaches. Poker is a game of skill and chance woven together. You cannot control which cards fall, but you can control how you respond. Across these chapters, we have explored strategies for every stage of the game. We began with the importance of mindset and preparation. We examined the foundations of pre-flop play, stack size awareness, and value betting. We moved through the mid-game, where pressure and patience mix. We focused on the final stages, from short stack survival to heads-up play. Each chapter provided tools, but the deeper lesson has always been about discipline and steadiness. Poker rewards calm decision-making. It punishes impatience, recklessness, and tilt. These truths hold as much at a home table as they do under the lights of a major tournament. One reflection worth carrying forward is that poker teaches humility. Even the best players lose pots to worse hands. You may play perfectly, only to see a river card change everything. This can be frustrating in the moment, but in the long run, it is what keeps the game honest. No one is invincible. Accepting variance with humility allows you to keep playing your best without being weighed down by results. A calm acceptance of luck's role frees you to focus on the choices that are in your control. Another reflection is the importance of patience. In the early stages, patience keeps you from wasting chips on weak hands In the mid-stages, patience allows you to wait for the right moments to apply pressure. In the late stages, patience helps you avoid reckless decisions when the blinds feel overwhelming. Patience is not passive. It is active discipline. It is choosing to fold when folding is correct, to shove when shoving is right, and to wait when waiting brings the best chance of success. Poker rewards patience at every level. Balance is another lesson that carries beyond the table. Balance between aggression and caution, between risk and reward, and between focus and relaxation. In poker, leaning too far in one direction invites opponents to exploit you. The same is true in life. Balance keeps you grounded. It reminds you that success is not about one big move, but about a steady flow of good decisions made over time. Community is a quieter lesson that emerges in small field home games. These tournaments are about more than chips. They are about the people around the table. The shared stories, the friendly rivalries, the laughter between hands. Even in moments of tension, the game brings people together. In reflecting on strategy, do not lose sight of the human side of poker. The game connects us, teaches us, and gives us moments to remember long after the chips are put away. Looking ahead, the lessons from this guide can carry into every game you play. The technical knowledge of ranges, bet sizing, and stack depth will sharpen your decisions. The psychological awareness of tilt, fear, and pressure will steady your mind. The emotional control of patience, humility, and balance will carry you through swings both at and away from the table. Poker is more than a card game. It is a training ground for focus, resilience, and perspective. Consider how these reflections apply to one final example. Imagine you are heads up in a home tournament, holding a modest stack. You raise with ace-8 suited, and your opponent calls. The flop comes 10-6-2 with 2 of your suit. You bet, they call. The turn brings a third suited card, giving you the flush. You bet again, they shove, and you call. In this moment, you feel the rush of victory as the river blanks. You win the tournament. The technical details mattered. Your raise, your bet sizing, your call. But what carried you to this point were the softer lessons. The patience to wait for this opportunity. The balance to stay active without overcommitting. The emotional control to keep playing your best even after losing pots along the way. These reflections are what allow you to reach the end with confidence. Closing reflections remind us that poker is both technical and human. It is a game of math and psychology, but also of patience, humility, and connection. In a small field home tournament, these lessons come into focus quickly, because every hand matters and every decision is magnified. By carrying forward the strategies we have explored and the deeper lessons they represent, you prepare yourself not only for future games, but for challenges beyond the table. Poker teaches us to stay calm under pressure, to embrace patience, and to respect both skill and luck. These are lessons worth holding, long after the last chip has been pushed across the felt.